The helicopters circled above like mechanical birds of prey. Through the ship's external cameras, Hyunwoo could see at least a dozen aircraft from different nations, converging on their position. American, Russian, Chinese, and European military forces, all arriving within hours of each other. The ice around the excavation site had become an impromptu international incident. "They're not going to be happy about what we just did," Taiyang said, watching the monitors nervously. "They'll get over it," Jia replied, though her voice carried less certainty than her words. "What are they going to do, arrest us for discovering the truth about human history?" Daehyun stood at the communications console, watching the transmission data flow across the screens. The upload was 90% complete. The archives of First Home were spreading across Earth's networks like water flowing downhill. Impossible to stop, impossible to contain. Millions of computers were receiving and replicating the data every second. "The broadcast is going everywhere," he said. "I'm seeing downloads from every continent, every major city. People are sharing it faster than we're transmitting it. They're hungry for this knowledge." Bora was monitoring social media feeds with Hana's help, watching humanity's real-time reaction to learning about its origins. The responses varied wildly. Some people thought it was an elaborate hoax. Others believed immediately and celebrated. Religious leaders were already making statements, some calling it heresy. Others finding ways to incorporate the revelation into their faith. "Look at this," Bora said, pointing to a stream of messages in Korean. "A temple in Seoul is saying that First Home was the original paradise described in ancient texts. They're not rejecting the information, they're embracing it." And here, Hana added, showing a newsfeed, "A university in Brazil just announced they're starting a crash program to translate and study the medical archives. They want to begin clinical trials within months." The responses weren't all positive. Government spokespeople were calling the transmission a sophisticated cyber attack. Military leaders demanded to know who was responsible. Intelligence agencies were scrambling to verify the information, while simultaneously trying to control its spread. But the data was undeniable. Geneticists around the world were examining the DNA evidence and finding it irrefutable. Astronomers were pointing their telescopes toward the coordinates given for First Home's star system, 800 light-years away. Linguists were analyzing the language files and discovering connections to ancient human languages that should have been impossible. "The helicopters are landing," Taeyang announced. "Multiple teams approaching on foot. They'll be at the entrance in minutes." Hyunwoo took a deep breath. "Then we go meet them, all of us. We show them we have nothing to hide because we've already shared everything." They climbed to the surface together, the 4 modern humans and the 3 ancient ones. The Arctic wind hit them with familiar force, but now there were dozens of people in military gear surrounding the excavation site. Soldiers with weapons, scientists with equipment, officials with satellite phones all stood in a rough circle around the opening that led down to the ship. A man in American military uniform stepped forward, flanked by Russian and Chinese officers. "Dr. Park, I'm Colonel Johnson. I need you and your team to step away from that vessel immediately. This site is now under international military jurisdiction." "On whose authority?" Hyunwoo asked calmly. "On the authority of the United Nations Security Council, who authorized this joint operation 2 hours ago. You've created an international crisis. That technology down there could destabilize global security." Daehyun stepped forward, and the soldiers immediately raised their weapons. He raised his hands peacefully. "I am the one responsible. This technology, as you call it, belongs to all of humanity because all of you are my descendants. You cannot claim ownership of your own heritage." The colonel stared at Daehyun, and Hyunwoo could see the man's mind working, trying to process what he was seeing. A man who by all accounts should not exist, speaking perfect English through a translator device, claiming to be 50,000 years old. "You're one of them," the colonel said, "one of the survivors from the ship. I am Daehyun, security officer of the colony ship Remembrance, out of First Home, and I am exercising my authority as the senior surviving officer to declare that all technology and information aboard this vessel is to be freely shared with all nations and peoples of Earth. No one nation may claim it," a Chinese officer spoke up. "You have no authority here. This is Norwegian territory and the UN has jurisdiction." "Then let's ask Norway," Taewon said, pulling out a tablet that showed live news feeds, "and the UN, and everyone else." The screens showed something remarkable happening around the world. In New York, the UN General Assembly was in emergency session, with representatives from every nation demanding access to the archives. In Norway, the government had announced that the ship would be declared a World Heritage Site, protected and accessible to all. In cities across the globe, millions of people were taking to the streets, not in protest but in celebration, feeling for the first time that they were part of something larger than their individual nations. "You see," Bo-Ra said, watching the feeds with satisfaction, "you cannot put this knowledge back in the box. It belongs to everyone now. The question is what you do next." The standoff might have continued, but then something unexpected happened. One of the Russian soldiers, a young woman with tears streaming down her face, lowered her weapon and stepped forward. "Is it true?" she asked in Russian, her words translated by devices everyone now carried. "We're all from the same place? All of us humans came from First Home?" Daehyun nodded. "Every person on this planet carries genetic markers from the refugees who landed here 52,000 years ago. You are all related, all part of one family that survived impossible odds." The soldier looked at her American and Chinese counterparts. "Then why are we pointing guns at each other?" It was a simple question, but it cut through the military posturing like a knife. One by one, the soldiers began lowering their weapons. They were professional military personnel, trained to follow orders, but they were also human beings who had just learned something profound about their place in the universe. Colonel Johnson slowly lowered his sidearm. "This is way above my pay grade," he muttered. "Someone else can figure out the politics. But I'll be damned if I'm going to be the idiot who started a war on the day we found out we're all cousins from outer space." Over the following weeks, the situation stabilized in ways no one had predicted. The ship became exactly what Bo-Ra had suggested, a heritage site for all humanity. Scientists from every nation worked together in the largest cooperative research project in history. The archives were translated, studied, and gradually implemented. The medical breakthroughs came first. Treatments for cancer, heart disease, and genetic disorders began saving lives within months. The energy technology took longer to deploy, but within a year the first fusion reactors based on First Home designs were coming online, providing clean power without pollution. But the most profound changes were social and philosophical. The proof that all humans shared the same refugee ancestors made old prejudices seem suddenly absurd. How could you hate someone for their race or ethnicity when you both descended from the same small group of survivors? The conflicts didn't end overnight, but something had shifted in the collective human consciousness. Hyunwoo found himself appointed to an international committee overseeing the research and distribution of First Home knowledge. It was exhausting work, dealing with bureaucrats and politicians who still wanted to control or profit from the discoveries. But it was also rewarding. He could see humanity beginning to change, beginning to grow. Jia worked with Bo-Ra to establish medical clinics using First Home technology. They started in poor regions that needed it most, providing treatments that had been science fiction mere months before. The look on a mother's face when her child was cured of a previously terminal disease made all the controversy worthwhile. Tae Yang led an engineering team that was adapting First Home sustainable building techniques to modern construction. Cities began to transform, becoming greener and more efficient. He liked to joke that he had gone from drilling through ice to drilling through bureaucratic red tape. But his enthusiasm never dimmed. Hana became the official archivist of the project, working with Taiwan to organize and present First Home's history in ways modern humans could understand and appreciate. Their documentary series about the fall of First Home and the desperate colony missions became the most watched program in television history. The three ancient humans adapted to their new world with remarkable grace. Daehyun was recruited by the UN peacekeeping forces to teach conflict resolution techniques from First Home. His lectures on how to wage peace instead of war influenced a generation of military officers and diplomats. Bo-Ra divided her time between medical research and speaking tours, sharing First Home's understanding of genetics and biology. She was particularly passionate about environmental issues, helping modern humans understand how First Home had lived in balance with their planet for 100,000 years. The archives of First Home contained more information than anyone could absorb in a lifetime. Taiwan spent days showing the team fragments of knowledge that would revolutionize human understanding. Medical techniques that could cure diseases Earth's doctors still struggled with. Energy systems that produced no pollution. agricultural methods that could feed billions without destroying the land. But it was the social and philosophical archives that fascinated Hyunwoo the most. First Home had eliminated war not through force but through a fundamental restructuring of how people thought about conflict and cooperation. They had systems of education, governance, and community that had kept them stable for 100,000 years. It wasn't perfect, Taewon admitted, showing them records of First Home's history. We had conflicts, disagreements, and problems. But we learned to resolve them without violence. We learned that different groups could maintain their unique cultures while still being part of one larger human family. Jia was working with Bora, examining genetic samples from the entire team. The results were fascinating. Every modern human carried markers that could be traced back to First Home. The integration with Earth's native hominids had made humanity stronger, more adaptable, but the core genetic heritage was undeniably from the colony ship survivors. "You're healthier than we were," Bora said, studying the scans with professional interest. "The hybridization with Neanderthals gave you stronger immune systems. The adaptation to Earth's environment made you more resilient. In some ways, you're an improved version of us." "But we lost so much knowledge," Jia replied. "Your medical technology alone could save millions of lives." "Knowledge can be regained," Bora said. "It's here in the archives, but it must be used wisely. That's the real lesson of First Home." As the days passed, the three ancient humans grew stronger and more accustomed to the modern world. Daehyun exercised constantly, rebuilding muscles that had atrophied during the long sleep. He asked endless questions about modern military technology and was both impressed and disturbed by what he learned. "Your weapons can destroy entire cities in moments," he said one evening, reviewing files on nuclear technology. "First Home developed similar weapons during our early industrial age. We came very close to destroying ourselves. It took a global catastrophe to make us realize the path we were on." "What kind of catastrophe?" Hana asked. "A limited nuclear exchange between two rival nations," Daehyun said. "Not enough to end the world, but enough to kill millions and poison vast areas of land. It was the wake-up call we needed. After that, we devoted ourselves to finding better ways to resolve conflicts." Taeyang had been studying the ship's engineering systems, amazed by their elegance and efficiency. "Your fusion reactors are so much cleaner than ours," he said. "And the materials science, the way you built this ship to last, it's incredible." "Why did you make things to endure so long?" "Because we thought long-term," Taewon explained. "We planned not for our generation, but for generations 10,000 years in the future. We built things to last because we believed humanity would continue. Even when our sun was dying, even when we knew First Home would be destroyed, we still believed in the future." It was on the 15th day after the revival that the situation changed. Hana was monitoring the satellite communications when she noticed something unusual. Multiple signals were pinging their location. Reconnaissance satellites from different nations were focusing on the Arctic site. "We've been discovered," she said, her voice tight with worry. The excavation was too big to hide. "Intelligence agencies have noticed something is happening here." Hyunwoo felt his stomach drop. They had been so focused on learning from the ancient humans that they hadn't properly considered what would happen when the world found out. "How long do we have before someone shows up?" "Days, maybe," Hana replied. "The Americans, Russians, Chinese, they all have bases within flying distance. And I'm picking up increased military communications. They know something important is here." Daehyun stood up, his expression serious. "You need to decide what to do with this information. Your world's nations will want to claim this ship and its technology. They will fight over it. Then we don't let them have it," Jia said firmly. "This knowledge belongs to all of humanity, not just the powerful nations." "But how do we stop them?" Taeyang asked. "We're just 4 scientists. We can't stand against military forces." Bora had been quiet, studying the ship's systems on a portable device. She looked up suddenly. "The communications array." "Taewon, could we use it to broadcast directly to the entire planet?" Taewon's eyes widened with understanding. "The ship's transmitter is powerful enough to reach every satellite in orbit. If we link to your communications networks, we could bypass all the governments and media control. We could speak directly to every person on Earth." "And tell them what?" Hyunwoo asked. "That their entire understanding of human history is wrong? That we're descendants of alien refugees? The panic alone could destroy civilizations. Or unite them," Daehyun countered. "When First Home faced the dying sun, we came together as a species. Old rivalries meant nothing when we all faced extinction. Earth isn't facing the same immediate threat, but you are approaching the silence. Maybe knowing your true origin will help you face what's coming. The debate continued for hours. Yunwoo argued for careful, controlled release of information through proper scientific channels. Jia wanted immediate full disclosure. Hana worried about the social chaos that would result. Taeyang suggested a middle path, releasing some information while holding back the more sensitive details. In the end, it was the ancient humans who made the decision for them. "This is not your choice to make," Taewon said quietly. "The knowledge in these archives belongs to humanity, all of humanity. We learned on First Home that keeping knowledge secret, controlling information for the benefit of the few, it always leads to problems. The truth wants to be free, but people will panic," Hyunwoo insisted. "Religions will be shaken. Governments will fall. There could be violence, chaos," perhaps, Bora agreed. "But there will also be wonder and hope in the beginning of real change. You cannot protect people from the truth by lying to them. We tried that on First Home and it never worked." Daehyun walked to the ship's main computer console. His hands moved over the controls with growing confidence. "The communications array is functional. I can have it powered up and broadcasting within 6 hours. The question is, what message do we send?" They worked through the night, crafting a transmission that would change the world. Not just the scientific data about First Home, but the philosophical teachings, the warnings about the silence, the hope that humanity could overcome its divisions. They included star charts showing the location of First Home, medical treatments that could save lives immediately, and energy technologies that could end the fossil fuel age. Most importantly, they included the genetic data proving that every human on Earth shared the same ancestors, that all the racial and ethnic divisions were meaningless in the face of their shared origin among the stars. "Are we really doing this?" Hana asked as Daehyun prepared to activate the transmission. "Once this goes out, we can't take it back. That's the point," Jia said. "No one can suppress it if everyone has it." Hyunwoo looked at each member of his team, then at the 3 ancient humans who had been given an impossible second chance at life. He thought about the ship buried in the ice, the thousands who had died trying to reach this world, the 1,000 who had survived and become humanity's ancestors. "Do it," he said finally. "Send it all. Let humanity know who we really are." Daehyun pressed a final control. Deep within the ship, systems that had been dormant for 50,000 years roared to life. The communications array deployed through the ice, breaking through to the surface. Satellites around the world began receiving a signal unlike any they had encountered before, powerful enough to override security protocols, clear enough to be decoded by even basic receivers. The transmission contained everything. The complete archive of First Home was uploading to every server that could receive it, spreading across the internet faster than any government could stop it. Within minutes, billions of people would have access to humanity's true history. "What have we done?" Hana whispered, watching the data flow across her monitors. "We've given them the truth," Taewon said. "Now we see if they're wise enough to use it." Through the walls of the ship they could hear a new sound, distant but growing louder. "Helicopters approaching fast!" The military forces were arriving, too late to stop the transmission but certainly able to cause problems for the team. Daehyun listened to the approaching aircraft and smiled grimly. "And now we face the consequences. Welcome to the new world, my friends. It's going to be complicated." The revival process took 11 days. Jia worked almost without sleep, studying the ship's medical systems and coordinating with the AI through mathematical sequences and basic symbolic logic. The ship's computer was sophisticated enough to understand her intentions and helpful enough to guide her through the complex procedures needed to safely wake someone from 50,000 years of suspended animation. Hyunwoo insisted they revive only one person first. If something went wrong, they would still have 2 others who might be saved. After much debate, they chose the pod that showed the strongest life signs, the one containing a tall man with strong features and what appeared to be a military bearing even in sleep. The chamber filled with mist as the gel began to drain. The man's chest moved, taking its first real breath in millennia. His eyes flickered beneath closed lids. Medical monitors that Jia barely understood showed brain activity increasing, moving from the barely there maintenance level to something approaching normal consciousness. When his eyes finally opened, they were dark and confused. He looked at the ceiling of his chamber, then slowly turned his head to see the 4 figures in environmental suits standing around him. His mouth moved, forming words in a language none of them had ever heard. "The translator," Jia said quickly, pointing to a device the ship's AI had highlighted for them. "Put it on him." Taeyang carefully attached a small device to the man's temple. It took several minutes to calibrate, during which the man tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back down. His muscles were weak from the long sleep. He tried to speak again, his voice rough and uncertain. The translator began to work. His words came through their helmet speakers in fragments at first, then more clearly. Where am I? The ship. Did we make it? Did we reach the refuge world?" "You're safe," Hyunwoo said slowly, hoping the translator would work both ways. "You're on the planet you were trying to reach. You crashed in the ice. We found you." The man looked at each of them, his eyes focusing with growing clarity. He tried to speak, coughed, and tried again. "How long?" "A long time," Jia said gently. "Approximately 50,000 years." The man's face went blank with shock. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His hands gripped the edges of his chamber, and for a moment Hyunwoo thought he might panic. But then something changed in his expression. The man was trained for crisis, that much was clear. He took several deep breaths and forced himself to stay calm. "My name is Dae-hyun," he said finally. "I was a security officer on the colony ship Remembrance. We were carrying 10,000 souls from the first home to this world. If 50,000 years have passed, then I am the last of my people." "Not the last," Jia said. "There are 2 others in stasis. We can wake them. And Dae-hyun, there's something you need to know. You're not alone. Humanity survived. Your escape pods made it to the surface. Your people lived. We're your descendants." Over the following days, as Dae-hyun regained his strength, he learned about modern Earth. The team showed him pictures of cities, technology, billions of people spread across every continent. They showed him the progression of human civilization, from stone tools to space stations. Dae-hyun wept when he saw it. "We made it," he said, his voice breaking. "We actually made it. Even though the ship failed, even though most of us died, humanity survived." But there was also confusion and sadness in his eyes. "But you don't remember," he said. "You don't know where you came from. You think you evolved here naturally. Tell us," Hyunwoo urged. "Tell us the truth about who we are." Dae-hyun's story took hours to tell. He sat in the ship's central chamber, now warmed and powered by the awakening systems, and spoke of a world the team could barely imagine. 52,000 years ago, humanity had lived on a planet they called First Home, orbiting a star 800 light-years from Earth. Their civilization had existed for over 500,000 years, rising from primitive origins just as Earth's humanity would later do, but following a different path. They had learned to live in balance with their world, had eliminated war through philosophy and wisdom, rather than just technology, and had reached for the stars not out of conquest but curiosity. "We were not as advanced as you in some ways," Dae-hyun admitted, looking at Hana's electronic tablet with wonder. "Our computers were larger, less sophisticated, but in other ways we surpassed you. We understood genetics deeply. We could cure almost any disease. We lived in harmony with our planet for 100,000 years. But then their son had begun to die, not the natural death of old age, but something premature and catastrophic. A cosmic event had destabilized the star, and their scientists calculated they had perhaps a century before the inner planets would be consumed. We built ships," Dae-hyun continued. "Hundreds of them. Every vessel we could construct was filled with people, with seeds and genetic samples with all our knowledge and history. We sent them to every potentially habitable world within reach. Earth was one of dozens of targets. The Remembrance had been designed to carry 10,000 people in stasis, along with enough equipment and supplies to establish a colony on the new world. But during the journey, something had gone wrong. An asteroid field in the outer solar system had damaged the ship's shields and hull. Systems had begun failing one by one. The captain ordered the evacuation, Dae-hyun said, his voice heavy with old grief. The smaller ships, the landing craft, they all launched toward the planet below. We could see it was in an ice age, cold and harsh, but it had breathable air and water. The captain sent everyone who could fit into those ships. Maybe 1,000 people made it off before the main vessel started to break apart. Dae-hyun had been helping with the evacuation when debris had struck him. He woke in a medical pod, one of the last 3 people still aboard the dying ship. The AI had been trying to save them. trying to land the massive vessel somewhere anywhere that might preserve the last passengers. I remember the crash, Daehyun said quietly. The ship breaking through layers of ice, the cold rushing in, then nothing until you woke me. The escape pods, Jia said. The 1,000 people who made it to the surface. They're our ancestors, Daehyun nodded. They would have had some equipment, some knowledge. But they landed on a world already inhabited by primitive humans, your Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. Over time, they would have interbred, shared DNA. The technology would have broken down, the knowledge faded. After a few generations, they would have forgotten they came from the stars. They would have become part of this world. But the genetic markers would remain, Jia said excitedly. That's why modern humans are also genetically similar. We all descended from the same small group of founders. Not because of a population bottleneck on Earth, but because 1,000 refugees from another world mixed with the native population. Hyunwoo felt dizzy with the implications. Everything they thought they knew about human origins was wrong, or at least incomplete. They were a hybrid species, part Earth and part something else. Part native evolution and part alien colonist. We need to wake the others, Daehyun said. Bora is a genetic engineer. She can help you understand the biology better. And Taiwan is a historian. He can access the ship's archives and show you our full history. Over the next week, they carefully revived the other 2 survivors. Bora was younger than Daehyun, with sharp eyes that took in everything about the modern humans with scientific fascination. Taiwan was older, with gray in his hair despite the stasis, and he moved with the careful dignity of a scholar. Both reacted with the same mixture of grief and joy when they learned the truth. Their mission had failed, but humanity had succeeded. The species had survived, even if it had forgotten its origins. Taiwan immediately asked to access the ship's computer core. Everything is here, he said, his hands moving over the holographic controls with practiced ease. 500,000 years of history. Our science, our art, our philosophy, and something else. Something we discovered in our final years that you need to know about. He pulled up files that made the others lean forward with interest. Star charts showing the positions of thousands of civilizations across the galaxy. But most of those markers were grayed out, inactive. We called it the silent, Taiwan said gravely. In the final centuries before our sun died, we detected a pattern. Advanced civilizations would reach a certain level of development, then vanish. Not gradually, but suddenly within a single generation. We monitored hundreds of worlds. All of them went silent. What caused it? Hyunwoo asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. We never discovered the truth, Taiwan replied. Some believed it was a predatory intelligence that harvested advanced species. Others thought civilizations destroyed themselves at a certain technological threshold. Still others suggested that advanced societies transcended physical reality and simply left the material universe behind. He changed the display, showing graphs and charts that tracked technological advancement against civilization collapse. But we noticed something else. Civilizations that maintained balance, that didn't advance too quickly, that kept wisdom alongside knowledge, they lasted longer. First Home survived longer than most because we learned that lesson. The plasma torch burned blue-white against the dark metal. Taeyang worked carefully, cutting a precise circle into what appeared to be an outer door. Sparks cascaded down into the darkness below, creating brief moments of light that revealed the vast hull of the buried ship. They had been at this for 6 hours, taking turns with the cutting equipment while the others monitored for any dangerous gases or radiation. Almost through, Taeyang announced. His voice crackled through the radio, distorted by the ice around them. Whatever this alloy is, it's incredibly dense. My torch should have cut through normal steel 3 times faster. Hyunwoo watched from a safe distance, his heart pounding. In all his years as a scientist, he had never felt this mixture of excitement and fear. They were about to enter a vessel that had been sealed for 50,000 years. Anything could be inside. With a final burst of sparks, the cut section of hull fell inward. There was a sudden rush of air that made everyone step back. The pressure differential equalized with a sound like a deep sigh. For a moment, no one moved. Air sample is clear, Jia reported, checking her instruments. No biological hazards detected, no toxins. It's old air, but it won't kill us. Everyone stays in full suits anyway, Hyunwoo ordered. We don't know what we're walking into. One by one, they climbed through the opening. Hyunwoo went first again, dropping down into a corridor that was completely dark. His helmet lights revealed walls that were smooth and curved, built on a scale that made him feel small. The ceiling was at least 4 meters high. This was built for giants, Hana whispered as she climbed down behind him. Look at the proportions. Everything is oversized. Gia was the last to enter. As soon as her feet touched the floor, something changed. Strips of soft blue light began to glow along the walls, running the length of the corridor in both directions. The lights flickered at first, then strengthened, as if the ship was waking up from a long sleep. Motion sensors, Tai Yang said, his voice filled with awe. After 50,000 years, the ship still has active systems. They moved deeper into the vessel, following the main corridor. The walls were covered in panels with symbols that looked almost like writing, but in no language any of them recognized. The characters were angular and flowing at the same time, beautiful in their complexity. Take pictures of everything, Hyunwoo instructed. Every symbol, every panel, every detail. We need to document all of this. The corridor opened into a larger chamber. Their lights revealed rows of cylindrical containers, each one about 3 meters tall and transparent. Most were empty, their interiors dark and lifeless, but some contained what looked like dust or ash, the remains of something that had decomposed long ago. These are stasis pods, Gia said, approaching one of the containers carefully. Look at the medical connections, the life support tubes. These were designed to keep living things alive during long journeys. How many are there? Hana asked, panning her camera across the vast chamber. Hundreds, Gia replied. Maybe thousands. This was a colony ship or an evacuation vessel, but most of the passengers didn't make it. They moved through several more chambers, each one telling the same tragic story. Empty pods, remains of the dead, and the haunting silence of a journey that had ended in failure. The team worked in near silence, too overwhelmed by the scale of what they were seeing to make casual conversation. It was Tae Yang who found the active chambers. They were in a central room, different from the others. While the rest of the ship felt abandoned, this room still hummed with power. 3 cylindrical pods stood in the center, surrounded by equipment that glowed with soft lights. These ones are different, Tae Yang called out. They're still running. Come look at this. The team gathered around the 3 pods. Inside each one was a figure, suspended in some kind of clear gel. They were humanoid, unmistakably so, but taller and more powerfully built than modern humans. Their features were peaceful, as if they were simply sleeping. Gia pressed her gloved hand against the transparent surface of the nearest pod. Run every scanner we have. I need to know if these are alive. For the next hour, they examined the 3 figures with every piece of equipment they had brought. The results were impossible to believe. The scanners showed brain activity, heart function, cellular processes all operating at extremely low levels, but definitely present. These beings were alive, preserved in some kind of suspended animation that had kept them viable for thousands of years. I'm getting DNA readings, Gia said, her voice shaking. And you're not going to believe this. They're human. Or at least 98% human. Their genetic code is almost identical to ours. That's impossible, Hana protested. Humans didn't exist 50,000 years ago. Not like this. Not with the technology to build ships like this. Then where did they come from? Taeyang asked. A new light began to pulse in the center of the chamber. A holographic display materialized above a central console, showing symbols and images that slowly began to resolve into recognizable patterns. Star charts, mathematical formulas, diagrams of planetary systems. Gia approached the console carefully. She had always been good with patterns, with finding connections that others missed. She studied the holographic display, her fingers hovering over the controls. Tentatively, she reached out and touched one of the symbols. The display changed, showing a sequence of images. A planet orbiting a distant star, cities covering continents, ships launching into space, then disaster, a sun growing unstable, consuming the inner planets, hundreds of ships fleeing in all directions, each one carrying thousands of refugees. It's showing us their history, Gia said. This is where they came from. A planet orbiting another star, they were evacuating. The holographic display shifted again, showing a map of what could only be interpreted as a journey through space. A line stretched from one star system to another, ending at a very familiar yellow sun. Earth's sun! They were coming here, Hyunwoo breathed. This was a colony ship heading to Earth. More images appeared. The ship approaching Earth, still in the grip of an ice age. Then something going wrong. Systems failing, the ship falling through the atmosphere, the desperate crash landing in the Arctic, in the deepest ice where the cold might preserve whoever was left alive. The others, Hana said suddenly. The display showed hundreds of ships. Where did they go? Jia manipulated the controls again. The hologram showed smaller vessels, escape pods launching from the dying ship before it crashed, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattering across the planet, landing in different locations, their passengers emerging into a prehistoric world. Oh my God, Jia whispered. Hyunwoo, do you understand what this means? Hyunwoo did understand, and the realization made his knees weak. The escape pods, their passengers surviving, spreading across the planet, mixing with the primitive hominids that already lived on Earth. 50,000 years of evolution and integration. We're them, he said. Humanity didn't evolve on Earth, we came from somewhere else. We're the descendants of the survivors. The holographic display pulsed once more, showing the 3 occupied stasis pods with indicators showing they were stable but could be revived. The ship's AI, still functioning after all this time, was giving them a choice. We need to wake them up, Jia said. They can tell us everything. The truth about where we came from, about who we really are. Or we could be opening a door we can't close, Hana countered. We don't know who they are or what they'll do when they wake up. Taeyang looked at the 3 sleeping figures. They've been alone in the dark for 50,000 years. If it were me, I'd want someone to wake me up. I'd want to know that someone survived. Hyunwoo studied the console, the sleeping figures, and his team. They had come to the Arctic to study ice cores and climate data. Instead, they had found the origin of humanity itself. The decision before them would change the world forever. We wake them, he said finally, but carefully. Jia, can you work with the ship's systems to begin a safe revival process? Jia nodded, her hands already moving over the controls. The AI is helping. It wants us to succeed. Give me time, and I think I can bring them back. As she worked, Hyunwoo looked at the star chart still glowing in the holographic display. Somewhere out there, 800 light-years away, was a dead star system, their true home. The place where humanity had first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Now, 50,000 years later, their descendants would finally learn the answer. The wind howled across the frozen wasteland, carrying ice crystals that stung like tiny needles. Dr. Hyunwoo Park pulled his thermal hood tighter around his face and checked the readings on his tablet for the 3rd time that hour. The numbers didn't make sense. They hadn't made sense for 2 days now. Still getting that weird signal? Taeyang Lee called out from near the drilling equipment. The young engineer was adjusting the massive bore that would soon punch through 200 meters of ancient ice. Hyunwoo nodded, his breath creating clouds of mist in the Arctic air. It's stronger now, almost like it's calling to us. He immediately regretted the poetic language. Scientists didn't talk about signals calling to them. But after 15 years studying glaciers, he'd never encountered electromagnetic readings like these. Dr. Jia Kim emerged from the heated research tent, carrying a portable scanner. Even bundled in heavy winter gear, she moved with practiced efficiency. She had been Hyunwoo's student once, years ago in Seoul. Now she was one of the world's leading experts in extreme environment biology. I ran the analysis 3 times, she said, holding up the scanner. That's not natural. Whatever is down there, it's metal. A lot of metal. Could be a mineral deposit, suggested Hana Choi, the team's communications officer. She was monitoring their satellite uplink, making sure their data streamed back to the research station in Svalbard. Iron ore can create strange readings. Jia shook her head. Not like this. The composition is wrong. It's refined metal, not raw ore. And the shape... She pulled up a 3-dimensional image on her tablet. Look at this ground-penetrating radar scan. That's not a natural formation. Hyunwoo studied the image. His pulse quickened. The shape buried beneath the ice was enormous, at least 800 meters long. It had smooth curves and geometric angles. Nothing in nature made shapes like that. How deep did you say it was? 212 meters, Jia replied. The ice above it dates back about 50,000 years. That thing has been frozen since the last ice age. Taeyang whistled low. 50,000 years? Humans were barely using stone tools back then. What could have made something that big? The question hung in the frozen air. Hyunwoo looked at each member of his team. They were supposed to be studying climate change, taking ice core samples to understand Earth's atmospheric history. Instead, they had found something impossible. We need to see what it is, Hyunwoo said finally, but we do this carefully. No one outside this team knows about this yet. Understood. Everyone nodded. Hana looked worried. When do we tell the research committee? Or the Norwegian government? We're in their territory. After we know what we're dealing with, Hyunwoo said. If we announce this now and it turns out to be nothing, we'll look like fools. If it's something important, we need facts first, not speculation. Over the next week, the team worked in shifts, drilling through the ancient ice. The bore brought up core samples that Jia analyzed obsessively. The ice told a story of Earth's past. Volcanic ash layers, ancient pollen, trapped air bubbles that showed what the atmosphere was like thousands of years ago. But as they got closer to the object, something changed. The ice is different here, Jia said one evening, showing Hyunwoo a microscope slide. See these patterns? The water froze unusually fast around the object, and there are trace elements I can't identify. Not radioactive, but definitely not natural. Could it be a meteor? Taeyang asked. Maybe some kind of asteroid that crashed here? Meteors don't have smooth surfaces and right angles, Jia countered. She pulled up another radar scan. I've been mapping the entire structure. It has what looks like corridors inside, chambers. This isn't a rock. It's a vehicle. Hyunwoo felt his mouth go dry. You're saying there's a ship buried under the ice. I'm saying there's a structure down there that was built by someone. Or something. Jia's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she held the tablet. And Hyunwoo, there's something else. The electromagnetic readings? They're not just residual energy from the metal. Something down there is still powered on. That night, Hyunwoo couldn't sleep. He lay in his insulated sleeping bag, listening to the wind batter their camp. A ship, 50,000 years old, still powered. The implications were staggering. If this was alien technology, it would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. But what if it wasn't alien? The thought was almost more frightening. What if some ancient human civilization had built this? That meant everything in the history books was wrong. It meant humanity had risen and perhaps fallen before, leaving only this frozen tomb as evidence. 3 weeks after the initial discovery, Taeyang's drill finally broke through. The bit punched into an open space and everyone held their breath. They had reached the ship. I'm reading atmosphere on the other side, Taeyang reported, checking his instruments. The interior was pressurized. After 50,000 years, there was still air in there. Jia collected samples of the vented gas. Oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. It's breathable. Well, it was breathable. The ratios are a bit different from our air. Higher oxygen content. Like Earth's atmosphere in the distant past, Hana observed. She had been researching while the others drilled. When dinosaurs roamed, the air had more oxygen. Could this ship be that old? The ice isn't, Jia reminded her. This ship was put here 50,000 years ago, give or take. The question is where it came from before that. Hyunwoo made his decision. We go in full hazmat protocols. Hana, I need you to set up a secure satellite link, encrypted. Send our findings to Dr. Minho Kang at the International Science Foundation. No one else. Tell him we need guidance, but we're proceeding with exploration. Are you sure? Hana asked. If this goes wrong, then it goes wrong, Hyunwoo interrupted. But we didn't come to the Arctic to play it safe. We came to discover the truth. Whatever that truth is, it's waiting for us under this ice. The next morning they widened the borehole and prepared to descend. Taeyang rigged a secure cable system, while Jia triple-checked their equipment. Each team member wore a full environmental suit with 4 hours of air supply and multiple cameras recording everything. Hyunwoo went first. The descent through 200 meters of ice took 20 minutes. His helmet light cut through the darkness, reflecting off the walls of ancient ice. He could see the layers, each one representing years of snowfall compressed into solid form. Finally, his feet touched metal. The surface was smooth and dark, unmarked by corrosion. Whatever this material was, it didn't rust or decay. Hyunwoo ran his gloved hand across it and felt the metal vibrate slightly. Something inside was still running, still alive after unimaginable time. I'm on the hull, he radioed up. Taeyang, send down the cutting equipment. We're going inside.